When it comes to Old Testament literature, some people would say, oh gosh, this is a dusty old book written many years ago. What possible relevance could it have to modern society? Well, somebody who knows the answer to that and other questions, lecturer in Old Testament theology at Laidlaw College, Dr. Jong. Kia ora, good morning. Thanks for your time today.
Kia ora, Andrew, and kia ora to all the listeners.
Today, looking at the wisdom literature from the Old Testament, and in particular the book of Ecclesiastes. Now, I happen to know this is a favourite book of yours in the Old Testament. If you had to pick a favourite book, John, would this be near the top of the list?
Oh, it's a tough question. I definitely do like it. Yeah.
What is it about Ecclesiastes? Because some people, on a cursory read, they'd go, "Oh gosh, isn't that depressing? Everything is meaningless, and what's the actual point?" It seems to be yes, wisdom, but with the ministry gift of cynicism, perhaps.
Yeah, well, cynicism, yeah. Okay. So we refer to the writer as Kohelet. So we get the word Ecclesiastes from, so let's call him Kohelet. Definitely cynical, yes. It's a bit of a bewitching book in the sense that the more you read it, the more you get to appreciate it. It appears kind of simple. It's actually got great depth. Yeah. So it's a fascinating book, yeah.
When it comes to, I suppose, cynicism, for some people, they go, well, gosh, that doesn't even belong in the Bible. You know, aren't we supposed to be, more positive and be optimistic and trusting in God in all things? It does stand out a little bit, perhaps a bit of Lamentations on the side there as something with a different tone or a different flavour than other books of the Bible, perhaps?
It does. The great American Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann actually takes Christians to task for, he says, we've become divine yes men. We just say yes to God. And books like Lamentations, you mentioned, Psalms, and Job is another, and Kohelet falls squarely into this, is this whole Old Testament idea of grappling with God.
Yeah.
And asking hard questions. Yeah, so definitely, it's not something that is characteristic of us Christians.
And it's certainly all of those books that you mentioned there, known as the wisdom literature, and perhaps that is part of the wisdom, is not just saying, everything's going to be perfect and just being rose-coloured spectacles, optimism about everything, but wrestling with some of these difficult subjects, with having tough conversations with God when things don't go the way that we hope that they would.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the Old Testament as a whole, if we think of it, you mentioned in your provocative opening statement, it's a dusty old book. Christians often are drawn to the New Testament, but remember the Old Testament is Scripture. It's the Word of God for Christians, and it's most of the Bible, and it covers a period of 2,000 years of people in relationship with God, generation after generation. So it's got so many resources there. The New Testament, of course, is very important. It's the revelation of Christ, the birth of the church. Yep. It's only one generation. Yeah, so it is a important resource for the church, is the Old Testament, and sadly somewhat neglected, and we could do a lot more with it.
When people think Ecclesiastes, some people think the lyrics to the song, I think it was late 60s, early 70s, for everything there is a season, turn, turn, turn. Now, the turns weren't part of the original lyrics from Ecclesiastes, but it's this wonderful passage of saying sometimes good things happen, sometimes bad. It's all part of life, very philosophical lyrics.
Very philosophical. That was an interesting song. The Birds, they also misunderstand it to some extent. Yeah. It's actually one of the most cynical passages in Ecclesiastes. Wow. Yes, there is a time, and he goes through all the different times, and he says, God has appointed these times, and we can't understand what God is doing. Yeah. So he's Kohelet is very frustrated at this. So it's a fascinating passage.
And kind of, on a light reading through Ecclesiastes, it kind of goes through the things that we might rely on, I suppose. It pulls out the foundations of the sorts of things that people might think, well, hey, if I want to have a meaningful life, I should focus on this thing. I should focus on how happy I am, or how much wealth I accumulate, or various other things, which, I mean, very much a part of modern society as well, of course.
It is. So Kohelet is amazing like that. He sets himself an experiment at the beginning of the book to examine everything under the heavens or under the sun. So that is within our experience as humans.
Yeah.
And he starts poking and prodding. So one of the first thing his first experiments, we said in chapter 2, is he explores pleasure. And that's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because we live in a very we've got in our, speaking for modern Western people, we're quite privileged in a sense. We have a lot of scope for seeking pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Our advertising industry focuses on that.
Yeah.
If you look at advertisements, it shows happy people,
yeah.
Smiling happy people.
Yeah.
So can I just share a bit about it? Because one thing that's fascinated me as I look at Ecclesiastes is that, I mean, the issues that you just mentioned, Andrew, we also have modern wisdom thinkers in the form of, so-called self-help. It's a bit of a derogatory term, but I don't see it like that. I think a lot of these books are very helpful. A very popular one for Christians, that guy, John Mark Comer.
Oh, yes.
So, say, for example, that book, The Relentless Elimination of Hurry.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah.
So a lot of really good stuff in there, very careful thoughts. That's an example of a modern wisdom book. Mm-hmm. But the thing that fascinates me with Kohelet is that he anticipates much of what is now being presented. So if I can just share a couple of examples.
Yeah.
So let's just think about pleasure. So chapter 2, verse 1, he says, I said to myself, come now, I will make a test of pleasure. Enjoy yourself. So that's his test. Mm-hmm. And boy, he doesn't hold back anything. Verse 3, I searched my mind how to cheer my body with wine. Gets into that. Look at verse 8. I gathered for myself silver and gold, the treasures of kings, provinces. I got singers, both men and women, the delights of the flesh, and many concubines. I mean, sounding a bit dodgy,
Yeah.
But he's just not on. He is just going with the pleasures, whatever he wants. Verse 10, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep them from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure.
Wow.
For my heart found pleasure in all my toil. That was my reward for my toil. What's his conclusion? Then I considered all that my hands had done, the toil I had spent doing it again. All was vanity and chasing after the wind. Yeah. There was nothing to be gained under the sun. I've come across a American psychologist, Martin Seligman. I don't know if you're familiar with the name.
No.
Very famous American psychologist who developed the discipline of positive psychology. And he said, as psychologists, we're always dealing with people who are unwell. Mm-hmm. But what if we talk what we've learned from psychology and help people who are well to live better? So positive psychology.
Okay.
And he did, as a psychologist, clinical experiments. And his conclusion, pleasure has no lasting effect on happiness.
Wow.
How's that? So that's, Kohelet had already told us this more than 2,000 years ago. So pleasure is good, he says. It's like the whipped cream and the cherry on top, mm-hmm. but it only has real value if you have a meaningful life, which is, and he comes up with two ideas: the good life where you're involved in doing something constructive, or the meaningful life when you're in the service of something greater than yourself. And then pleasure has value.
Some people, and certainly in modern society, they just go for, hey, more cream, more cherries, thanks. Skip all the other stuff, and hey, perhaps Ecclesiastes showing us, don't be surprised if that doesn't have a happy ending, right?
In fact, he's saying, be assured that it won't.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So this pursuit of pleasure for its own sake will not have a happy ending. I think we see that in our society, all around us.
Yeah.
Have I got time for one more?
Yeah, time for one more. That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. Here's one that really fascinated me. Chapter 4, verse 4. Then I saw that all toil and all skill in work come from one person's envy of another.
Wow.
This also is vanity and a chasing after the wind. So this whole issue of status. And I came across an article by Jonathan Rauch in the New York Times entitled "Why Prosperity Has Increased but Happiness Has Not." And what modern research shows us is that we don't become happier by having more. We become happier by having more than someone else.
Wow.
And so in his article, he says, humans are walking, talking status meters. And so Cahallet's put his finger on this already, but he's already named it. He says this too is vanity. And so
it's an interesting one, because some people would go, oh no, hard work and achievement, these are all admirable goals. This is how a good Christian person should live. They should put their nose to the grindstone and get resources that they need for their family or even for building the kingdom.
Absolutely.
We can justify it in lots of different ways. But back in the book it says, but are you doing it for that reason, or is it just so that you can feel better about yourself, right?
That's right. So those things are all good. You've actually just anticipated, time for one more?
Yeah, exactly. One more.
Okay, anticipating where Kohelet ends up with it all, chapter 9, verses 7 and 8. Go eat your bread with enjoyment, drink your wine with a merry heart. For God has long ago proved what you do. Let your garments always be white. Do not let oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love. All the days of your vain life you are given under the sun, because that is your portion in life and in the toil with which you toil under the sun. And I think that's where he ends up.
Yeah.
And so he's saying it's not a matter of doing these things so that you can be better than someone else. He's saying you're doing that because that's your place in life and you can enjoy those things. And in so this, I mean, so many of the things that we read in our modern sort of self-help kind of literature, mindfulness, minimalism, contentment and acceptance, being present in the moment, enjoying the gifts, recognizing they come from God, and enjoying your work and the life that you have. So I just think it anticipates so many things that we hear about today.
So modern wisdom found in a very ancient text, and hey, given that it is inspired by the Spirit of God, we shouldn't be surprised in that regard. But encouraging people to go deeper into the text of Ecclesiastes and to perhaps even prayerfully consider doing some theological study on the topic. Laidlaw.ac.nz for more information about that. John, thank you for the work you do. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Kia ora.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.